Welcome back to the Soul Sync. It's me, Psychic Medium Jason Paul, and it's always lovely to have you join. So, as I said in my mini little episode, the last few days have been chaotic. I've been to London. I've never sneezed so much, dusting and going through possessions of a house that I did live in when I was 18. I lived in it for a few years. At the time, I remember being cabin crew. I remember having my uniform. I remember packing my Delsey suitcase, as all us Virgin cabin crew used to have. And I remember the sliding wardrobes, and I remember having all my waistcoats hung up and taking such pride in my uniform, because when I got that uniform, that first few days of being cabin crew, and they fit you for it in Virgin's headquarters in Sussex, I put that on, and it was like going from being bullied at school for being gay, and then to go a few years later to be in this like, oh, you couldn't have a gayer company if you tried. And to be wearing that uniform, and it had been like such a dream of mine to have that job. And I remember them making the transition to the police, which on reflection now, I don't have any regrets in life at all. But, you know, I think to myself, what the hell did you make that decision for? I'll never forget the first night there, just turning up with my suitcases and being shown the police accommodation and thinking, what have I done? And then being shouted at every day on the parade square. You know, it was like military school. And, you know, me being someone who got into trouble at school, being a bit of a fidget, being ADHD, and then being in that type of organisation and being really sensitive as well at the same time, you know. So, you know, my dad passed away, going through his possessions and seeing sort of keepsakes of things that he kept all those years ago. And despite everything, despite our rocky relationship at times, despite all the arguments, all the heated conversations, all the good times, all the bad times, all the laughter, you know, when someone really close to you passes away, you never know how you're going to react. And, you know, we can all have very different relationships with people we love. You know, sometimes the people we love absolutely drive us bonkers, but we wouldn't know what to do without them. And I'm sure, you know, if you was to ask my mum, she'd tell you that I'd probably drive her bonkers at times. But when someone, you know, that you love, you lose, it's very, very difficult. And even as a medium, I know my dad, you know, is around me a lot. I know that he, you know, lives on, and I know that he's been around me in recent days because I can feel that energy around me. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily make it any easier when someone you love passes away. But, you know, what mediumship has done for me is it's made me safe in the knowledge that we will meet again, and we can meet now, you know, in a lot of senses. You know, but nothing can ever get over that. And I, even, you know, as a medium, I fear very much the day that my mum one day passes away. So going through some of the keepsakes, seeing the things my dad had you know, kept, notes I'd written him, things I wouldn't have expected in a million years for him to still have. To be honest with you, I wouldn't even known existed. And to see them, you know, really touched my heart in just so many ways. And today it was mission accomplished, because we left the van and finally got it emptied. And it was just very emotional, actually. And to see my brother make such a move, you know, I feel like I've not had much sleep in recent days, but it just feels like, you know, roller coaster of just emotions tied to it. But, you know, I wanted to talk about that because grief really does affect us all. And the work I do as a medium, I think what inspires me, one of the most things with my mediumship is, you know, being able to bring messages back through and be that channel, be that voice, be that bridge that allows people to have that communication and be safe in that knowledge and to hear from. Because some of the things that moved me the most in recent years is the messages that I've had from my family members. And to be honest with you, that's why I love getting a reading, because I get to hear from them, even though I do know that they're around me all the time. And as they are for you with the ones that you've lost. Right then, let's change the energy completely. Now, my guest today is Reverend Gurdeep Bhogal, and I really like her. She's warm, she's funny, and she's incredibly grounded. And she somehow manages to talk about some absolutely enormous spiritual ideas without making you feel like you need a degree in metaphysics to keep up. Now, Gurdeep is a psychic medium. She's a spiritual minister, a healer, and a yoga teacher. She actually grew up in West London, and she actually lived in the area that I was a police officer in Ealing Borough in West London. So you couldn't actually make this up. She actually then went on to have a successful career with British Airways, and I worked for Virgin Atlantic, so we had lots to talk about, and it made me laugh. It almost felt like we were doing our careers in reverse. So she grew up in West London. She went on to have a successful career at British Airways, eventually moved to America, and then in one of those kind of wonderfully bizarre twists that life seems to throw at us, she found a spiritualist church through someone that she found on a dating website. So the spirit world apparently works through absolutely everything, even online dating, it seems. And what followed for Gurdeep was this extraordinary opening, which involved a Kundalini awakening. And, her story, she just couldn't have got more value into this if you tried. So enjoy, my darlings. Gurdeep, welcome to the Soul Sync.
Thank you, Jason. It's so good to be here. I'm so happy that we're doing this.
I am as well. It's lovely to have you on. Thank you for sparing the time.
Yeah, so I have lots of different labels. I am a psychic medium. I'm a certified medium with a spiritualist church. I'm a minister at that church. It's the Swampscott Church of Spiritualism. And I was ordained in 2024. I'm also a Reiki Master Teacher and a yoga teacher. And I run a holistic practice in a very small seaside town in the Northeast USA called Marblehead. And yeah, it's been quite a journey. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Even just the guest form that you filled out, seeing that you work for British Airways. I used to work for Virgin Atlantic many a moon ago, but it seemed to me that you was totally unaware of the fact that you was a medium. How did you sort of first discover this, or how did spirit first come into your life?
We'll be right back.
Hello there, Soul Sync, it's me. I interrupt this episode for just a moment to ask if you find this podcast at all helpful, please leave a review on the platform where you listen to them. It helps other people to find it and it means the world to me. Now enjoy your episode.
Yeah, so, as a child, I wasn't one of these mediums who sees spirit as such, but I was always very much interested in spirituality as a child. I was quite a serious child. And my mother was a spiritual practitioner in the Indian wisdom traditions. And I learned so much from her just watching and being around her. And it asked a lot of questions, just contemplative questions about life and existence. But then I just kind of like went on my merry way along with where life took me, and ended up, working for British Airways, and that brought me to the Northeast USA. But before that happened, that was in 2003 that I came over to the States. When I was 17, I went to see a medium in Greenford, because I was raised in London.
Oh, yes, I
And
know Greenford. I was actually a police
yeah.
officer. I patrolled
Oh,
Greenford. That
wow.
was one of my local beats,
Yeah.
actually, so I know it well.
Yeah, so I grew up in West London, and my sisters were very much into spirituality as well. And I went to see this medium called Carol, who's now in the spirit world. And I was like blown away. I was really blown away by everything that she knew about me. And she brought my uncle through, my grandfather, and she described my messy bedroom, which was a little embarrassing, but it was quite interesting, and that kind of sparked my interest. But I just didn't have a clue that I could be a medium or was a medium. But it wasn't until I came to the States, and I didn't know anybody when I came here at all. And I went on this kind of like journey to meet people. Part of that was joining a dating agency to start dating and meeting people. And I met this guy, and he happened to be a member of the Spiritualist church, where I'm now a minister. And that's how spirit kind of like brought me to the church. The funny thing is, Jason, that this church is next to the library in a town called Swampscott. And the library is one of the first places that I actually went to. I joined the library and I would take out books and things like that. But I never noticed the church until the dating thing
Funny that,
happened.
isn't it? That you can go
Yeah,
through your life with sort of blinkers on, looking tunnel vision. And
right.
it's even funny. I live next to a reservoir, a
Yeah,
massive, massive 2.5 kilometre reservoir. And I'd lived here for about 3.5 years in my house. And I'd never, ever thought to even go near it. And one day during the pandemic, my mum said to me, "Shall we go up to there?" And I said, "Oh, no, no. There's do not enter signs and whatever around it." But my mum, being my mum, jumped over the fence. We went up there, and I thought, I've lived next to this for 3.5 years, and I've never
yeah,
once gone there. And it's so beautiful. I now
yeah.
kind of look at it as my own private reservoir because no one else goes up there, because you have to be pretty ballsy, Gurdeep, to jump over the do not enter signs. But it is interesting, isn't it? So you
It is.
sort of discovered this church then, funny enough,
Yeah.
for a dating website of all places, of
I
course.
know. Yeah, exactly. And, I went in and I thought to like, I was listening to the service and I was like, oh my God, this just makes so much sense to me. And then I started, taking some classes there, healing classes and mediumship development. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can like explore this. But I still, I was working for British Airways, an account manager, traveling the world and doing all of these things. I had no idea that this would lead me to where I am today. And it was actually an awakening experience that I had in the church, and it was a Kundalini awakening. And that's the thing that really made the difference in the path. And that's what really opened me up, cracked me open, as it were, to bring me into doing this work. Yeah. It
So the
was,
Kundalini
yeah.
awakening, because I will say from the get-go that I've never had one, and I've heard of a lot of people sort of talk about them and whatnot, and my
Mhm.
understanding is it isn't always beautiful, because opening up that quickly in such a short amount of time, it can be very troubling and exposing, and for people I've come to hear.
Absolutely correct. But I've done a lot of research since that Kundalini awakening, since that first one that I had, which was 22 years ago. And I've had subsequent awakening experiences since then. But there are different degrees of Kundalini awakening. And what you're describing is a very, very disruptive, kind of quick Kundalini awakening that kind of like makes you lose your identity. And that it wasn't that kind of awakening that I experienced. And I think I'm glad that it wasn't, in a sense.
I
And
could, yes. How did
yeah.
it feel to you? What happened?
Yeah, yeah. So there was this guy called Joel who had near-death experience, and he was doing a presentation at the church. And I don't know exactly what happened, but there was some kind of transmission. He took us into this meditation. And all of a sudden, I felt this energy inside me. It was like a vibration, and it started to move inside me. And I felt every every part of my body internally felt like it was vibrating. Externally, if you were looking at me, you would see my right arm and hand was shaking. But I just felt this energy opening up, and I really didn't know what it was. I had no idea. And even after that day, I still didn't know what it was exactly, but it just continued to happen. And especially when I was either like sitting in a mediumship circle, or if I was doing some kind of healing. And then I think what happened was that this awakening, the energy that awoke within me, is a Kundalini awakening is really about the visceral experience or the lived experience of the divine, which we all are, the soul waking up. And it's like revealing to ourselves our true nature. So that's really what a Kundalini awakening is. But it just took me on this path of like, of discovery, because I didn't know what was happening. My teachers at the time didn't know what was happening. And so I just kind of went with it, because it didn't seem like it was interfering with anything, but it just kind of like heightened my curiosity about all things spiritual. And I felt this energy every time I was connecting with spirit or doing something that was connected to spirituality. So it gave me some signs. And then I went on this long journey of discovery after that.
And looking back kind of from where you are now,
Yeah.
what's your belief on why that, happened? Because it seems like that was the trigger for everything. But in your
Yeah.
case, it had to be quite instant and rapid. And, would you think there's something there in your character that needed that at the time, or?
We'll be right back.
If you're interested in mediumship, I'd love to invite you to something a little bit special. On Friday, the 28th of August at 7:30 p.m. UK time, I'm hosting a free online evening of mediumship with the wonderful Nicola Farmer. It'll be an evening of spirit communication, love, laughter, and connection. It's completely free, live on Zoom, and absolutely everybody is welcome. You'll find all the joining details in the episode notes, and I'd love to see you there.
I think because I did a lot of research about Kundalini awakening and about near-death experiences and spiritualism, tantric yoga, mediumship, all of the above since that point. And so I learned a lot, and I learned that, and my view is that when somebody has an awakening experience, it's because you're ready to be opened up in that way, because there's a part of what you're meant to do in this life that is connected to that awakening and to that spiritual experience that brings you forward. And it might be that I've had like other lifetimes where I've been a healer or a medium or some kind of spiritual teacher or practitioner, which I wholly believe. And it's just when the moment is there, when your soul is ready to take that next step. And honestly, Jason, like I really loved, the work that I did before I did the holistic work full time, and really enjoyed like travel and working in the travel industry and all of that kind of thing. But my soul's purpose is expressed in all the things that I'm doing and who I am today. And I just know this, and it feels right. And I think that's why it happened. And I think the reason it happened in the Spiritualist church, because I had another major awakening experience in another spiritualist church, was
Oh,
to
wow.
bring me into spiritualism. And I work now at this intersectional space between ancient yogic wisdom and modern spiritualism and mediumship. And I think that's why it happened in those places. And it's pretty profound, but I know that I'm in the right place doing the right thing. This feels like this is my soul's calling.
Mm. It's very much the same as me with my mediumship, because I had a lot of different careers, so many different careers actually before and I seem to be finding myself in a situation now where mediumship is ever more becoming my full-time occupation, because I've just recently sold my business that I've worked on for 10 years. But before that,
Right.
I was a police officer. Before that, I was cabin crew for Virgin Atlantic. Before that, I worked at Heathrow for Virgin. And
Yeah.
but I do also believe that it was all of that tapestry of experience of what happened to me in some of not nice ways in my 20s, bad
Yeah.
choices, bad decisions. But it's
Right.
that got to, because my awakening moment, I wouldn't say it was a pretty one. It was probably starting to fall into patterns of addiction and things. But
Yeah.
it was, for me, it was because my soul knew it was unhappy. I feel my soul was unhappy because it
Mhm.
wasn't living the life that it knew it was here to live.
Right.
And, I think I spent a lot of my life believing that, maybe when I get to a certain place in my career, I'll feel happier. Maybe when I have more
Yeah.
money, I'll feel happier. Then I
Right.
think I got to a place in my life where I had more money than I'd ever had, and I'd never been so miserable. So
Right.
it's interesting, but we all have these different paths to awakening, and sometimes it's, beautiful, sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's goddamn awful. But I don't think I'm yet
Yeah.
to meet a medium or someone who's in this work that hasn't had quite a lot of trauma at some point in their life. And it seems to me that, that seems to be a doorway into this kind of work. And I guess it makes sense, you're not going to be healing people or be an effective healer if you've never experienced something in your own life, are you?
Absolutely correct, Jason. And, I realize now, because I also teach now, teaching is a huge part of my work, that we can only, like you say, understand somebody else's pain or somebody else's journey by our own direct experience of that thing. And I say to my students as well, are you sure you want to be on this path? Because it's not an easy path. And just like you, I've experienced a lot of trauma in my life as well, and I think that is 100% absolutely part of the developmental journey. And the developmental journey of the medium is not easy, and it is a path of very, very deep work of like, inner reflection and of moving through challenges. And that's also connected to Kundalini awakening as well, because what's happening is we are being asked to actually accept the truth of the duality of this world and to feel everything. And that's not easy. That's not easy for anyone, really. I was as a child a family within a family of immigrants, and that was a difficult journey in itself as well, immigrating to England from East Africa, and then trying to kind of like fit in, and then in the life journey as well, there were a lot of struggles in my family, there were a lot of struggles in my life as well, of like trying to be an independent woman. That's been a
Well, all of
journey
these
within
things are
itself.
going to have, it's so interesting. What happens to us as a child,
Yeah.
even those moments of feeling that perhaps you don't belong or whatever, they will have stayed with you. And even parts of that, I'm sure, will have come into, the belief that you have about your capability to be a medium, I'm sure.
Right, right, exactly. And it's a struggle. And you must know this as well, like in your development as well. We have so many doubts, we have so many fears, and all of these things are things that we need to overcome. And they're actually connected to our personal journey, the trauma that we've experienced. And you talked about addiction as well. My brother was addict as well, and he's now in the spirit world. And that was another part of the journey. But like the mediumship itself, it makes us strip away all the layers of illusion to get to the nuts and bolts of being human. And that's, you have to be really courageous to be a
You
medium.
do? Well, you do, because, what mediumship does is it makes you look at every part of your life, because
Yeah.
if you're finding that there's something holding you back in your mediumship, it certainly isn't the spirit world's capability. It's you, and it forces you to look at those things. And I feel that uh, it- the journey of a medium is not easy, because what you're trying to do effectively is become the clearest channel that you can possibly be.
Yeah.
And, we all have a lot of muck within us that
Yeah.
needs clearing out. And it is difficult, in any other aspect of our life. I hadn't even realized until I kind of reflected back recently that a lot of my business success that I've had has come from me being very hard on myself, for instance.
Yeah.
And that seems to have got me quite far, actually. I'm not going to say it's the recipe for for manifesting, because it's not.
Yeah.
But, you manifest in different ways. But in the early days, it was probably fear that drove a lot of the success. So then when I'm looking at my mediumship, well, fear and doubt is going to be a block in that sense. And I always say this, that I think one of the most difficult things about mediumship is the simplicity of it.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
overcomplicate it.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, because there's nothing wrong with the spirit world, and the spirit world is intelligent and magnificent, and what gets in our own way is just the way we've been conditioned and our own doubts and fears. But like you said, I think that overcoming those things is part of the actual journey itself, is to realize that we have been conditioned, that we create our own barriers to the freedom of just being able to be who we really are and to connect with the spirit world. And I think that everything is a teacher. Everyone is a teacher as well. And I think that it's, as a medium, it's really important to always remain humble and to really invite the lessons that life brings us and invite the challenges as well, in a sense. And I think that that's also something that we become better at, is to, and that's where we see our own growth and evolution as mediums and as people, where we have this better ability to deal with the challenges that life brings us. The challenges don't go away. They're
They
still there.
don't. They
They're
don't.
still
And
there.
and you grow and develop. And even I look back at my life now, 5 years ago, well, about 6 years ago, when I started developing my mediumship, I didn't even realize how sensitive I was. I would think I'm a little bit moody or a little bit irritable at times, but
Yeah.
it's because I'm very sensitive. But since I've kind of stepped into that sensitivity, I've really found that now I don't want to be around people as much. And sometimes I have to push myself to get out, because I think, come on, Jason, now live your life. But it's
Yeah.
made me have to look at myself in ways I never thought I would do. And I know that mediumship is my calling, because I wouldn't have chosen this path necessarily, but it was
Right.
like you. And when I was reading through your notes, it felt to me like a lot of the beginning for you was about near-death experiences. And for me, it was very much about that, because I believed in the spirit world so much, as far as my granddad was a medium, but I used to think, is it just wishful thinking, So I wanted proof. So it was the near-death experiences that very much drew me into this. But, I think mediumship has helped me in so many ways, not just, Gurdeep, in the sense of the mediumship work I do. For instance, the change I've just gone through with stepping away from my business, I don't think I'd have been able to have the courage to do that without the mediumship, because it was the confirmation of the spirit world that I was making the right decision that made me feel confident enough to go in and do what I needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's such beauty in that connection with the spirit world and with our spirit guides and with our own soul as well, because everything that we need to know is actually within the soul.
Well,
And
that's a difficult thing
yeah.
for people to stomach.
Yeah.
Everything you need to know, Gurdeep, is within you. It is within you. Why do I not
Yeah.
feel this?
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And I think that's what's missing from modern life as well, is like a connection to spirituality. And a lot of the traditional religions maybe don't have the right approach to help people to really connect to their own souls and to realize that everybody and everything is part of this one consciousness that is very powerful. And the spirit world helps us to see that, helps us to know it from our direct experience. And I love that because I feel like I have an advantage in life. It's not
Well,
an
you
advantage.
do.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
do. Yes.
Yeah, not an advantage to like necessarily make more money, because that's not the purpose of life. But
No, the spirit world aren't going to
yeah,
get rid of the queue at the bank, are they?
exactly. But the advantage is that we can feel and know this inner sense of peace, and we can do the things that our soul wishes to do and express in this world. And that brings an enormous sense of satisfaction. And I feel so blessed and so thrilled with my life like now. I certainly don't earn as much money now that, compared to when I was working in the corporate world, but I feel fulfilled. I feel like I'm helping people. I feel like I'm serving spirit. I feel like my life has great purpose. I meet so many people here and in the spirit world like you. And it's just incredible. I could never have imagined this for myself, to be honest.
Just shows, doesn't it? It's
Yeah,
money. It really
yeah,
can be the root of all evil, even as you say.
yeah.
Okay, I'm not earning the money I was, but if I'm sure I was to say to you, Gurdeep, okay, you can earn double, but I'm going to have to take the mediumship and the healing away from you. You wouldn't do it.
Never. I would never
No.
would. I never would, because it's who we are. It's who we are, and it's what we're here to do. And I feel blessed as well to be a teacher, because I can help other people to understand that it's okay for them to express their soul's greatest desires in this life, and that it's possible, and that we don't have to listen to anybody else who tells us otherwise. And to me, I feel like that makes the world a more beautiful place, when people are expressing the uniqueness, the unique nature, and the unique qualities of their soul.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because so much in our lives now, we are trying to be someone else. And a lot of us go through our lives, and I would even say this about, my dad who passed away recently. Was he ever living in the truest nature of his soul? Well, no, I wouldn't say he was, because he would struggle a lot of the time of not being happy, living through a lens of fear a lot of the time. And I think, some people go through their whole lives and they never have been the truest expression of themselves or their soul, because they don't feel comfortable doing that. And I do think we have a problem at the moment whereby we need authenticity more than ever. How many people out there are actually living the truest expression of themselves? I don't think a lot of people, and I don't think social media, the internet, and all of these things is helping with that. We're living in the land, Gurdeep, of the airbrush.
That is so true. And I think that it's a real shame. I'm an analog person, because just from my
Analog.
age. Yeah,
Teletext. We like a
yeah,
bit of that.
exactly. I know. Oh my God, back so many memories. But yeah, so I'm definitely agreeing with you there, because I feel like there's a lot of disconnection, and what we do as mediums is the opposite of disconnection. We are actually like being very vulnerable and opening ourselves up, like we're kind of almost like dissolving some of our boundaries, so that we can connect with and blend with people who are in the spirit world. And these are people who've lived here on the earth plane, and we're connecting and blending with them, and we're blending soul to soul with our recipients as well. That in itself is the ultimate form of connection. It's a very vulnerable, intimate thing that we're actually doing, and it helps people to feel love and compassion. It helps people's hearts to open. And so I think we have a big role to play in this like disconnected world that you're speaking about, where social media creates this like impression of like an illusion of who we are. And I think that what we need so desperately in this world today is connection. Is we need heart opening, we need compassion, we need empathy, true empathy, and care for ourselves and others as well. And I think mediumship brings that to us, and
Mm.
not just for the medium, but it helps the recipients and the people in the audience, if you're doing a demonstration, to feel that thing, to feel real connection with real people, with real spirit people, connection with the spirit world and to understand that there's much more to life than airbrushing, you know?
There is. Well, it's even an interesting word, connection, as you're talking there. Yes,
Yeah.
in a lot of senses, we're more connected than we've ever been. Yes, through the cables that are run underneath the sea that carry the internet. But in many ways, we're certainly not connected to ourselves, and we're certainly not connected to that of our soul a lot of the time. And I think that's where the problem is. And I think we need to get back to connection. And there is such a vulnerability to mediumship, because that's one of the things I've struggled with. You know, I'm used to, with my job, standing in front of people and talking. That's something I've never really struggled with, even at school with show and tell. I think I was quite happy with that. But, you know, put me at an earlier stage of my development in front of someone to do a reading, you know, I would not be in anywhere near a vibration of love, because I'd be there in a state of almost sort of tense. Right? I want to get this right. I'm going to try now. I'm pushing my aura out. I must do that. I must force that. And it wasn't happening. And I think, you know, so many of us can relate to that. So I wanted to ask you, you know, a lot of the work that you do is at the intersection of yogic, bit of a tongue twister, that, wisdom and modern spiritualism. What is that intersection?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something that I spent a lot of time exploring and still am exploring, because my path also took me deeper into yoga and yogic practice, and the awakening experience took me into one of the awakening experiences took me into trance mediumship, and at the time that I was actually studying yoga as well, and that's when I decided to actually like leave my job and everything like that. But you know, yogic wisdom is the written form, like the texts that are associated with all of the different yoga practices, not just the physical postures, but the meditation, the mantra, all of the deep spiritual practices within yoga have been around for thousands of years. And so what the spirit has been showing me is that all of the information that we're discovering in our mediumship has already been there. People have been exploring this since, you know, time began, I guess, for millennia. And, you know, the yogic wisdom has the advantage of the written texts and the recording of all of the experiences of the practicing yogis over a 5,000 year period. And that's where the intersection is, because there's one text within yogic teaching that is familiar to a lot of people who are yoga teachers that you study in a 200-hour training, which is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And in that text, that's where I first started to see this connection between yoga practice and mediumship and modern spiritualism. There's a whole chapter in there that talks about the powers, the yogic powers that are cultivated through spiritual practice or yogic practice, such as meditation, breath work, pranayama, and mantra, and all of these other practices. And it talks about the magical powers of yoga, which are mediumship and healing. So I saw this connection out, and it was like this light bulb moment of like, oh my goodness. And so as I went deeper into the yogic studies, I realized that a lot of the yogic practices and the information that we have about consciousness from the yogic canon can help us to understand, you know, natural law, which is like the basis of spiritualism, and can help us to understand the mechanics of mediumship. So like if we're doing a spiritualist meditation, such as sitting in the power, it's very similar to silent, still meditation practice, dhyana practice of like single pointed focus within yoga. And so we have all of this information through the 5,000 years that can help us understand mediumship and healing much more clearly. And that's where that intersection is. And what I teach is yoga and mediumship. And my students then have like many tools to help them to get to a place of like what you were describing, where we have to really relax into our mediumship and not be thinking, not be questioning, not be kind of getting in our own way, and just relax the body, relax the mind, and be able to flow in that expanded state, which the yogic texts talk about, you know, since the last 5,000 years. So I feel like that's where my role comes in, as this intersectional space, or this intersectional knowledge between yoga and spiritualism and mediumship.
Very interesting. I've only ever done yoga, funnily enough. I've done it a few times, but the last time I did it, it was one of the Bikram yogas, the hot yoga, and I think it put me off because I honestly I looked like an absolute mess by the time I walked out of that place, and
Yeah.
I was starting to doubt if I'd made the right decision because I got in there and all of a sudden every man was taking off their top, and I thought, what are they taking off their top? And this is very intimate, but I realised after a very quick period of time while they were taking off their tops because it was unbearable, the heat of it.
That's
But
right.
I understand that, all these things to me, they just seem like different tools and methods and ways and techniques for tapping into what is that same energy. Because as you were saying that, it felt to me like what you're tapping into there is the trance energy, but you're doing it in a different way. But I guess for me, as you were talking, it was making me feel of like, well, mind, body, and spirit. Well, of course, you want to get the body into a state that allows that energy to flow. So that I cannot even sort of
Yeah.
see the connection in my mind there as you're saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just don't forget though that, yoga, because like most people think of postural yoga, most people think about the shapes that we make with our body
That's what
as
I'm thinking of
yoga.
now, to be
Yeah.
honest. Yes.
Yeah. But that's only a tiny little part of yoga. So that's where
Mm-mm.
and that's what I kind of like learned and realized as I deepened my studies of yoga, because the original yoga is meditation and was meditation. And the asana practice, the physical postures, came much later. They came more into the practice of around 3,000 years ago. So, meditation, the written recording of it in the yogic text goes back at least 5,000 years. So it was really more about the other practices. And if you notice today, like, breath work this breath work is very popular, and, meditation is very popular. And people were doing these things 5,000 years ago. It's just called a different thing. Pranayama is called dhyana, or whatever the names are that you want to choose for it. But yeah, you're right. There's lots of different ways of understanding, and there's lots of different paths that are going to take you to the places that you need to be connected to your soul, to be connected to the true nature of our being, which in my view is that we are multidimensional beings. We are spirit beings, and we're having this experience of being a human being in a physical body. But also, to your point, the postural yoga and the breathing, the pranayama and the meditation does help our physical selves. And as mediums, I think a lot of mediums don't realize how important it is to take care of the physical body as well as the mind, as well as the heart, in a more kind of energetic sense, but like taking care of the physical body, because this is the vehicle for our mediumship. And we don't always want to be transcending the body, because we're feeling and sensing and knowing our mediumship through our body, through our experience of being human. So I think that's really important to say.
Well, I think a lot of mediums struggle. I've noticed it as well. I've noticed a lot of mediums when I go on courses and whatever, they'll be smoking fag after fag after fag. But I think this, and I can't say anything because I do occasionally a puff on a vape.
Yeah.
But I do
Yeah.
think there's something I've noticed a lot of mediums can sometimes struggle as well with their mental health and stuff. And there's something in mediumship where I've even sometimes thought that some mediums spend too much time being with the other world, but they're not in the physical world enough. And some
Yes.
people, almost, I've come across some mediums, it made me rather sad. Where I thought, I feel that this woman is struggling so much that she wants to almost return to that world, and it's, I don't know if you've ever come across such things
Absolutely.
yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I love like everything that I can teach people about yoga, because it is one of the it creates a sense of like wholeness. We don't reject the physical body and the physical life, and we see, the significance and the divinity within everything, including the body. And so we're not escaping, because what you're talking about is a lot of mediums want to escape the physical world, the physical life. and just be in the spirit world, because it's such a nice feeling, and it feels so much like home, and it is in a sense. But I want to just say to people, like, pay attention to this life and this world and this human experience, because it's so beautiful, and that includes the challenges that we have, but it's so unique and beautiful to experience being a physical human being in the physical world. And yes, there are challenges. Yes, there's a lot of destruction. There's a lot of things that are hard, but there's so much beauty in this experience. And if we can find a sense of wholeness, I think that helps our mediumship as well. And I feel like it helps us to be happier in our lives. But I agree with you that, like, there's a lot of focus on mental health, and I do see a lot of mediums struggling with mental health. And I feel like that's where something like the yogic practices, or like going deeper into study of natural law, which is on the spiritualism side of things, can help people to understand what it is that we're here experiencing as people in the world. And I feel like there's so much joy and blessing to be received from the human experience. And when we connect with spirit people, they're sharing their stories of being human. And yes, they're in a beautiful place in the spirit world, but they're also sharing their life that they lived in. And this life is so fleeting that I encourage people
it
to
is, yes.
embrace it, fully.
Life goes, goes by in the blink of an eye. It really does. And we are a miracle. You think about the miracle it is for us even to be here in existence. I don't want to start going into too much biology here about, sperms and whatever. But there is, we are a miracle. You think how many ancestors we've had, and, how many generations have gone back, and we've come down here. And at the end of the day, we are here to learn lessons. And I've started to really question to myself recently about, how I perceive myself in the sense of we're not our bodies. And that is such a hard concept to understand, even the concept that God isn't separate from us. But the way I try and explain it to people now is Jason within or is Jason without? Well, no, the awareness of Jason is sensing everything. It's sensing, if I can feel someone on the other side of the pavement looking at me, I'm sensing that. So I'm not within, because if I was within, I wouldn't be sensing around. And that's how I try and explain it to people now. Jason is this energy field that is all capturing and inviting. And, you kind of sum it up when you look at siblings. Well, siblings who are brought up in exactly the same house, why personalities so different?
Right.
Then, it makes no sense if the souls weren't a real thing. It makes sense. The more you understand it, the more you connect the dots, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And I think that's also another area where yogic wisdom and philosophy is useful, especially the tantric yogic wisdom. And I'm not talking about neo-tantra, I'm talking about traditional tantric yoga, which is a deep, deep spiritual practice. And the knowledge that tells us that we are one consciousness. The non-dual wisdom teachings tell us that we are one consciousness, and that each of us as a person is an individual expression of that one consciousness, because that one consciousness is infinite. And that's where spiritualism talks about infinite spirit or infinite intelligence. And through that infinite intelligence or that infinite potential, the one consciousness can experience itself and its unique infinite qualities through each and every one of us and each and everything within existence. And that's kind of like a deeper kind of, like,
it's very hard to even comprehend, but it makes sense. We are one part of the consciousness. And of course, someone else is another part of that. And we have access to the entire consciousness if we allow ourselves to realize that we are part of it.
Yes. And I'd go further to say that we're not just part of it, we are it. Everything is it.
Yes.
Everything is it. And
because to say you are part of it still is separation there,
it's
isn't
separation.
it?
It's separation. That's exactly the key.
Yes.
And that's where I see the value of yogic wisdom to help us understand consciousness and understand mediumship in that way. And like, to your point, you are a field of awareness. And actually, the body itself is within the field of awareness. It's not that that the body is like experiencing awareness. It's that actually it's awareness that's experiencing the body. So that's another way you can sort of like connect the dots and say, well, actually my physical body is also an expression of the infinite spirit. And that can help us to feel more whole in our experience. And I love talking about consciousness. And I think that it's like, this Pandora's box, and you can just talk about it forever.
Well, it is. Well, it's so interesting. I don't think we'll ever truly know until we get back to the other world. But
Yeah.
it fascinates me because it's like a Pandora's box, and it's like rabbit holes that I just sort of go down. And this is why episodes of the Soul Sync can go down so many rabbit holes, because of that very nature. But consciousness it fascinates me, and even the fact that I could go to do a reading, and just at the simple thought and intention to connect, someone appears every time.
Right.
And I think to myself, how does that happen? And I've seen so many things with the spirit world over the years, as I'm sure you have in your development, exercises where you give, for instance, someone picks a number between 1 and 20, picks a song, that song is played, and then the spirit person will have a connection to the song within the reading. And you think it's just so fascinating how that all comes together. So you also, I was looking here as well, and it's interesting. I'm going to look more into yogic wisdom because I think I could do with a bit of that. But it looks, from looking at your background here, it even looked like the breath work is such a big part of that as well, because that leads so closely into it, doesn't it?
It does. And, the breath is such a simple tool that we have. And so, when we're doing sitting in the power or any other kind of like spiritualist practice as well, we are also focusing on the breath. But the breath is so many different things. It's like a vehicle for prana, the life force energy that we are. And so it's when we breathe, we're not just breathing in, oxygen, in the physical sense, but we're actually, if you think about it, in one round of breath, we are experiencing the whole cycle of life itself. So the breath can teach us about life and consciousness. So, for example, when we breathe in, we're becoming alive. All of our cells are enlivened with the life force energy, and we're nourishing and becoming alive. And then when we pause the breath, in the pauses, I feel like there's so much that's available. The pause is a point of stillness where we can sense and feel all of consciousness as awareness, as this thing that is greater than just the individual self. And it's a portal, the pause is a portal into connection with the soul, connection with spirit. Then when we exhale and we become empty, it's like dying, because we're releasing that life force, we're becoming empty. And then we also can pause there and become very, very still in emptiness, in this idea of like death as well, which isn't a negative thing. And so the whole life cycle is experienced in one breath, but it also gives us the tool of the portal that takes us into understanding consciousness and takes us into the spirit world. So that's how we can connect with the spirit world, because we find this silent stillness in the pauses between the active breaths. And so I feel like everybody has it. We're all alive, breathing, and you don't need to pay money or go to somebody to actually just be curious about and study your own breath. And it can take you into these deeper spaces of meditation and understanding of consciousness.
There's nothing more natural than dying, is there? It's as natural as birth, but
That's right.
we fear it a lot. Well, I wouldn't say I fear it anymore now. I think I've now got
Yeah.
to a stage where half of me wants to say I'm a bit excited to go back there, to be quite
I get what you're saying.
But the other half of me still thinks, oh no, I don't want to die. But
Right.
if it happened, I'll embrace it and I'll walk into the light with open arms.
Yeah.
I'll be one of those people though, where probably if ever I had something where there was a near-death experience situation, I don't think I'd probably come back. I think I'd just keep going towards it. I'm not sure. But it's so lovely
Yeah.
to have you on, Gurdeep. Thank
you.
you. And, if you do want to get in touch with you, I'll put where you are on the show notes. Will you do us the honour then of leaving us today on a final thought?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. Thank you so much for having me on. And I just want people to realize that the essence of who we are, our soul, which is part of the infinite spirit, is the highest expression of unconditional love. And if there's one thing that you could do today is to just breathe and connect with your own inner self, connect with your heart, allow the mind to become still, and realize that we are all, each and every one of us, love, and that love is the essence of everything that exists. So connect to love, be curious, and have a lot of self-compassion, and that will help you to connect to others as well.
Beautiful. Love is all
Yeah.
that exists, and
Yeah.
fear and horrible things is just the lack of that love.
Right. Yes.
Gurdeep, thanks for coming onto the Soul Sync. It's lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I wish you so much success and happiness in all that you do. And thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
And finally, next Friday, the 28th of August at 7:30 p.m. UK time, Nicola Farmer and I are doing a platform evening of mediumship. You'll find all the details at jasonpaulmedium.com, including the Zoom joining details. See you there.